Welcome to the Men of Honor podcast. My name is Corey, your host, and today we're going to be talking about coping versus thriving. And this is quite important, especially leading down to a second lockdown. I know the restrictions are beginning to come, and some people are feeling overwhelmed, and because of not knowing what's going to happen, they're feeling a bit anxious. And whether it's to do with your family or your business, or just your life as we know it is changing. So becomes very important to understand where you're at in terms of where you're at emotionally and mentally, in order to be the leader that you are. Because a lot of people, when they went through the first lockdown, there's a lot of things that were highlighted in terms of mental health issues and just the fact that everything had changed, but they come off worse. In fact, being in that lockdown scenario amplified every negative thing that they were already experiencing. And they'd also used different things within their lives, and whether it was work or whether it was social situations, in order to cope with life. So they would use that as a way of just numbing themselves from actually facing and confronting the things that are issues within themselves. And I'm no different. I was the same. And it got me thinking about a story of how I ended up becoming a pickup artist. I started learning how to become a pickup artist. At the time, I lived in Luton, which is a small town very close to London. And when I was going out, we were getting relative success, but it wasn't like a clubbing scenario. And just to lack of a better word, the people we were trying to date were not quite the people that we felt like we could date. I think it wasn't as challenging as we thought it could be. So, and again, because we got relative success, we were not great. We're just still learning how to pick up girls. But we thought it might be interesting if we actually moved to London, where you can meet literally people from all over the world and you get all sorts of people. And we thought it would be a great idea to do so. So moved to London, and I remember we arrived, we started house sharing, and we needed to get a job. So, we'd get a job where we'd work at least 6 hours or so a day, and then from there on, we would just game. So we'd go in the streets and go into clubs and pubs and literally just try and speak to people, learn social skills. So we started doing this, but I couldn't find a proper job, anything else, because I didn't have that many skills. I mean, I was only 19 at the time. So the only job I could find was a kitchen porter. So I was there washing dishes. And I remember the first few weeks how difficult it was, just standing the whole time, and then, scraping food from plates and putting them in the dishwasher. And I was literally one of the bottom of people working in that restaurant. And, obviously people spoke to me differently. They spoke to me as though, I'm the bottom. So the waiters and everybody felt like they were above me. So it was not a very nice environment, but it was at the same time, I was also trying to pick up girls and do my thing outside, and I was getting a lot of rejections. But it was a time where I started, the first few months, I went into coping. So I would approach, but not quite approach. So I would say hello, hi, and then sort of find a way of getting out of that uncomfortable situation. And really, I started finding ways of coping with the whole scenario. So in terms of work, I didn't look for anything better, so I just got used to having that money coming in. And then in terms of my results, in terms of what I'd gone to London for, picking up girls, I was not really having any success, really. So I started coping, and it went on for months, nearly 7 to 8 months, where I was in just that same scenario. In fact, I wasn't just by myself, I was with my friend, and we just got into that rut of sort of making ourselves feel like we're progressing in terms of pickup, and just sort of coping with everything else in terms of the money that was coming in. So literally, if I continued that way, I would have been in London right now, still a kitchen porter and everything else. And what really changed for me was one day we're sitting down and said, you know what, it's about 8 or 9 months we've moved from Luton and we're here, and we don't seem to be having the success that we wanted. So what is it that is causing us not to succeed? And when we really looked at it, it was just the fact that we were not really putting ourselves out there. Is that every time we had a rejection, we would spend another 2 or 3 days before we actually take action again. Or we would say next week, Monday, we're going to start, and then we're going to be on it from Monday. And then would by Tuesday would have failed, and then do the same thing, and it just kept going round in a circle. So, and why is this important in terms of going into to lockdown and in terms of your mental well-being? Is that we have things that we've set up in place that are external stimulus in order to help us cope with the world. So every time you feel uncomfortable in terms of who you are and the way you think, and you get negative thoughts about yourself, or the negative thoughts about what's happening around you, or you're dealing with stress or anxiety and everything else, we have built things in place in order to escape from that, in order not to feel it and not to confront it and deal with it. And some of it might go as far as being a trauma that you've been escaping for many years, and going into lockdown, that is going to be amplified a whole lot more. Therefore, if you do not have those coping strategies, then you, like we saw in the last lockdown, a lot of people started going on antidepressants and going to the hospital with mental health issues. And not just that, they started, there was a lot of people that end up being abusive to their wives, and so a lot more women were using shelters in order to escape their abusers. And there's been all these stories, and all of it is coming down to this thing right now I'm trying to talk about, that we live in a society where we promote coping. A lot of it is financial, so you got this commercial type things that we've got established. So a lot of businesses that make money from us coping. So if you think about the theatre, going to restaurants and everything. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with any of this. Is that I think these are things that you use to enjoy. But if you already got internal buttons that you can press to enjoy life without having to have any stimulus, it becomes a good launching pad. So you can add onto it by going out and doing everything else. You don't need to actually leave somewhere in order to go and seek out fun. And that's what I'm trying to point out, that if you have to be self-sufficient. So it came to this point, I think about 8 or 9 months into this, we realized that we really needed to take action, and we needed to make a stand and say, this is what we're going to do, and we're not going to stop until we get a change. And it's not up until you make that decision that you're going to make a stand and resolve this. So in terms of resolving, I've spoken about this a few times, that you really have to allow yourself to feel those feelings and confront them and write them down. What is it that is making you feel... So I've been doing this with... started working out, and part of my issues was with food. So every time I start feeling hungry, or when I've eaten and I've had food and I don't need any other food, so 30 minutes later I start desiring something that is sweet or whatever, I want to know what I'm feeling at the time that's made me want to feel like eating, or comfort eat or whatever. So I've been writing things like, and I'm finding it quite fascinating that the reason why I do that is that I will go through a thought process where I start feeling a little bit of fear, and then all of a sudden I start, trying to escape, but with the means that I've done before. So I'll elevate, and really eating sweet stuff is just to release some dopamine and stuff like that. So it's we try and use outside stimulus in order to affect our brain with an inflow of. So the way you release those dopamine things and chemicals through behavior and things that you introduce in your body. So whether it's alcohol, cocaine, or whatever, or just behavior which is sexual. And so there's certain things that you're already doing that are trying to help you to escape from those negative feelings, and that keep you. So those things that you do in terms of behavior and people, things that you introduce in your body, those are things that you do in order to cope with life. Now, you deciding to make a stand and confronting it and writing it down and actually starting to deal with it is the first step, because that's what's going to take you into thriving. And thriving is, just alluded to it before, is when you can... by default, you're already happy. By default, you feel like you're already enough. By default, then you don't need, whether there's a lockdown or no lockdown, it doesn't change your state. You might be apprehensive, it might be a little bit anxious in terms of maybe what's going to happen to your kids, your wife, your kids, your business, whatever. But if you're already internally happy, then you know that whenever you feel anything that is anxious, or it makes you anxious, makes you feel a little bit depressed or whatever, if you write it down and start actually seeing it on paper, so they can, sometimes the reason why you write it down is to actually see if it's fact or fiction, because some of it's fiction. Your brain just starts running away with things, and then you get into the point where because you've never taken time to actually see what it is, we usually try and cope and sort of suppress it, so, kind of thing. So by whether it's food or chemicals or entertainment or whatever, your phone, we always never feel it, and then we never deal with it. But being able to deal with it gives you an opportunity to actually not just live a life where you're free, but you can now become into a place where you're contributing. Because again, when you're coping, you're always looking at what's the next thing that I can introduce into my life in order to change my state or change the way things are. And whereas if you are already in a place where you're already happy and you're self-sufficient, look for a better term, with thriving, then you're in a place of contribution. And this is what it becomes, that you become happier. You become happier when you can contribute. And I've seen this quite a lot, is that when we started getting really good at picking up and started meeting different groups of guys, things changed for us when we started helping other guys to do the same and get the same results. And we were so, in terms of finances, started improving. So I ended up leaving my kitchen porter job and started even earning more than the manager. And at some point we went out, I was earning more than the whole team that was working at that point. I got from a place where I was coping to a place where I was thriving, and it was just based on the fact that I made that crucial decision that, you know what, I'm making a stand here, and this is the thing that I'm fearful of most, which was approaching at the time, is the thing that I'm going to try and resolve. It didn't matter how many rejections that we got. We were just going to plow through it, and through the rejections, we started learning how to calibrate in terms of conversation. And we actually end up being part of our program that you're only 100 rejections away from getting good. And it's just true. By the time you get to 70, you actually know that maybe I shouldn't approach this way. Maybe I shouldn't say that. Maybe I shouldn't tap her on the shoulder. Maybe I shouldn't rush up onto her. You start learning different things about yourself in terms of approaching. So we were welcoming the rejection. We welcomed it. And then we wanted to, so while you welcome the rejection, then you see how you can deal with it, because you now have it. And we didn't avoid the rejection, and that was so key in terms of moving from coping in terms moving to thriving. So hopefully this is helpful. And if you are nervous about the lockdown and what's happening in terms of your family, your business, and everything else, I hope this finds you in a place where you can just listen to it and it inspires you to actually move from coping into thriving. And I hope you're thriving, just not in business, but in every area of your life, so you can live your life by design, so you can have complete freedom. So thank you very much for listening. Please leave a review on wherever platform you're listening to on this podcast. And if you've got any questions, please reach out at Kuri Mahamba on my Instagram. And thank you very much, and I'll see you soon.